into the future, and God is giving him a glimpse of the things that are going to be occurring, then he might be seeing objects that he's never seen before. So how does he describe them? But only way he can describe them is in the language of what he already understands and what he sees. So a giant helicopter that's spitting forth fire and rockets might look to him like a giant mosquito or a locust or something that's coming. Or if he sees just something buzzing or a plane that's flying at supersonic speed and he's never seen man be able to fly, now you have to describe that. So John has two challenges. He not only has the challenges that God is revealing stuff to him, and remember, he's trying to write this all down. Right. How many of you could remember chapters and verses of stuff that God spoke to you and remember it verbatim? So he's got to write it as God is talking to him. And so that's where you get all those ands. But he's also seeing things that he's never seen before. And now he's responsible to describe them, to describe all of a sudden seeing things in the future that as somebody, when people were still walking around or traveling on horse and buggy, traveling around on a donkey cart, traveling around on a horse, he now has to describe what he's seeing in the modern era. And we don't even know if it's our time. It might still be another 600, 800 years from now, things that we couldn't even describe if we saw them. Right. You go back 30 years ago and you saw somebody do this, you assume they were looking at their watch. They might be checking their iWatch. They may be looking at their Apple Watch. In other words, in a span of 20 or 30 years, life has gotten so different. Imagine 2,000 years ago. Kevin.
I like how you said that right there, because growing up watching Star Trek, when she had that earpiece in there, we had that earpiece today. Mm-hmm. The little flat screen TVs.
Do you remember her name?
Today.
Lieutenant Uhura.
Yeah.
I wasn't a Trekkie. I was a quasi Trekkie, but I don't know it deep in, like, you know.
I was a Trekkie, but you look at then now, you see today now, and just like with John, when God revealed the future to him, mm-hmm. and as you listen, you look in Revelations, and as he's talking about this big dragon and spitting, but these airplanes, these fighting warplanes, this is what you see today. Mm-hmm.
Right, and again, these are things that back then he had never seen, but he has to see and describe. Right. So sometimes his description would only be based on what he saw it as or what he's accustomed to seeing, not on what we know it's going to be today. And so he's got to see that. He's going to see lands and countries he's never seen before. And so we have to take that into account. And like we talked about last week, the whole objective of this is not to try to pinpoint a time or a date. That's what people have gone wrong. Oh, Jesus is coming back on March 22nd because he don't want me to pay my taxes. And that's before, I'm going to get everything done. That's not what the goal is. The goal is to say, well, wait a minute, God. It says, and if we go back to the very first verses here, go all the way back, where it says, in the first chapter of Revelation, it says what? Blessed is he that does what? Readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy and keeps those things which are written therein. In other words, there are things in this prophecy that you're supposed to keep within you and you're supposed to chew upon that encourage you as you go into this walk. Even if we aren't yet at the tribulation period, there are still enough things in this time frame that will knock you off your walk with God unless you can come to understand, well, Lord, what is it that you're preparing me for? What is it? Why am I going through this? Lord, what are you sharpening me for? Because the problem with too many people, whether in the church or outside of the church, is they get up every day as if each day doesn't really matter. There's no difference between today and tomorrow. There's nothing that I'm learning. There's nothing that I'm growing in. There's nothing that I'm supposed to be reaching towards and becoming better at. And if you don't do that, then what happens is that you become, and we'll get into the churches later on when we do chapters 2 through 3, you become stale in your walk with God. How many people have you known were on fire for God, loved God, but then after a while they become stale because there was really nothing that they understood that I'm preparing for? I'll use this example and I'll close. If you've ever tried to exercise or commit yourself to something, one of the ways that it's easy is if you're set yourself to understand you're training for something. Have a goal that says, you know what, once I get to this weight, I'm going to run a half marathon. Friends of mine who have been committed to doing things, they'll do something like, they'll say, you know what, my goal is to run in the Marine Corps marathon. I'm not trying to win it, but they say I want to complete it. Well, now I'm training a year before, so every morning that I get up and I train, it's with this goal in mind. Our goal in mind should be that for God to look at us and say, I want to promote this, this person is going to be great in the kingdom that I have coming, because I've seen their work when they were here on the earth. They led, they were consistent, they were determined, they were focused. You're really auditioning for your job to come.